Hi everyone. I'm Ed, as you already know. I'm also Australian, so I apologize in advance for any use of foul language. It's something that's a little bit beyond my control. And I'll try to quickly tell you my story and how I became part of Ableton and got to be standing here in front of you today talking about what we do. I started off studying media arts and production because I was a mediocre musician and thought that if I became a sound engineer, I could still be involved with music and maybe earn some money from it, because I had no expectation that I could do that as a musician. But then I got into interactive media because after 2 years at university, I realized that people thought the idea that I could make money from being a sound engineer was laughable. At the time it was happening, so I decided to try and make interactive media. I got into design because I realized that I was pretty shit at making interactive media and I needed to learn how to do that. And then finally, after some time in design, I realized that what I was really doing was making things. And that's not literally making things as in assembling them with my own hands, but that what I was really doing was being responsible for the whole thing. So that meant involving myself in every part of the process, connecting with developers, copywriters, everyone that was involved in building the thing, to remind them and help them understand why they were doing it and what they needed to do in order to make sure that it was awesome. And so this is what I do today at Ableton. And I have to confess, although Andres said we're an internet age brand, I feel like a bit of an outsider here because we're a company of 200 people and we're 16 years old. And when we work and we make products, we actually probably share more in the kind of problems that we tackle with companies like Adobe and Microsoft than we do with a lot of the people here. But I don't think we're as different as we are at first glance, so I'll try to talk a little bit about what we have in common. And I'll start the story by talking about some trouble that we got into. And to borrow Heidi's expression, it was when the universe slapped us in the face. But more accurately, it was when most of our users wanted to slap us in the face. It was shortly before I started the company, we released Live 8, and we had serious problems with the software, with stability and with quality, and people were upset. And we needed to respond to this, and we responded to it in a couple ways. The first was that we stopped working on new products to fix the problems that we had with the product. So essentially the company stood still from a product perspective for about a year fixing this. The other thing we had to do was change how we made software. Every single part of how we designed products, built products, we decided to change to make sure that this didn't happen again. The other trouble that we were in was at around about the same time, rather inconveniently, we decided to bin a project that we'd been working on for about 18 months, which is a tremendously painful thing to do at a company, to tell 6 or 7 people that the last year and a half of their lives won't ever see the light of day. But the thing is, trouble and change, it's a cliche, but really is an opportunity. And it's an opportunity to find out who you really are, because in order to change and keep what you like about yourself, you need to understand what that is. So we had to ask ourselves, what the fuck are we actually doing? Why do we exist as a company? If we were to disappear, what would the world miss about us? And it turns out, unsurprisingly, it wasn't that we made software. What we realized we did was we make instruments. And that's quite a different perspective, making musical instruments compared to making software. The other thing we realized that we had to do was teach people, because people devote years of their lives to learning instruments. There are already people that have been using Ableton Live for 12 years and have actually taught us a lot about how our product works by learning it themselves. And in the end of the day, we are pushing music forward by trying to remove the boundaries to artist creativity. And that's actually how the company got started, by a pair of artists who were frustrated with what they could do with music software, so they decided to make software that let them do what they wanted to. And so in the end, it sounds like an obvious statement, but we realized we were about music, and about the people that make music, and the culture that they create through their creativity and through connecting to each other. And when you realize what you're doing at this level, it brings a tremendous amount of freedom to choose new problems to solve and to choose different approaches to solving problems. So we started on a bit of a journey after this trouble. One of the first things we did was we went from a brand that looks like this, which I would summarize as a brand that makes techno in Berlin in the 1990s. That's exactly what we were, to a brand that looks like this. And the difference is that we realized that if it wasn't for the creative efforts of the people that used our software, we simply wouldn't exist. And that, I guess in what some people call enlightened self-interest, their stories and our stories were linked, and that we would move forward by bringing their stories to the fore. Another thing we realized was that we didn't just have to make software, that we'd always had this idea of an instrument, so we thought, why not make an actual instrument that people can play? And the people that we made this with, Akai, told us we were crazy because this thing is a love child of an MPC and an accordion, and they thought no one would be into it, and they were wrong. And so that's what Push is about, this idea that you've spent all your day staring at the computer at work, and then you come home and you want to make music, and the last thing you want to do is then stare at a computer and make music. But what we realized when we started making an instrument is that it's not enough just to make the instrument, and it's not enough to make cool videos like that, where Roddy Kirk is jamming in Humboldthain in Berlin. But we realized that what people really wanted to know is, how the fuck did he just do that? And so a big thing that we do now is we capture performances from users, but we also get them to explain how they came to make that, actually in great detail. Because learning is, we've realized, very important to what we do. And then when you take that a step further, we realized that the problem that most users have is not that they don't know how the software works. It's that they struggle with their creative process. People struggle to get started. They struggle to continue, and they struggle to finish. And this is, I think, part of any creative process. And so we thought, what could we do to help people with that? And so our head of communication, Dennis DeSantis, published this book, which we announced at South by Southwest this week. It's called Making Music, 74 Creative Strategies for electronic music producers, and it's nothing to do with using any of our products. These can apply to anyone that makes electronic music, and actually people have told us they apply to design, photography, anything. And to hook into the theme print isn't dead, it certainly doesn't seem to be, because the response has been pretty good for us. We sold out of our run in the US the day after this thing was announced, and so I think it says well and truly that there's a place for books, and this is particularly interesting considering we give away about 1/3 of the content of the book online for free. Anyone can read it, and that the hardback costs $30. It's not a cheap book by any stretch of the imagination, and the thing is, the reason we charge for it is so that people actually read it, because we know that if people don't commit to something, then they're less likely to follow through on what they're doing. So to talk a little bit about the future that we have to deal with, the theme of dealing with complexity has come up a couple times in the last 2 days, and we see this as being one of our greatest challenges, and there's a few different kinds of complexity. There's the complexity of music culture that we have to deal with, and the problem of musical instruments. This is a gag I do in nearly every presentation, which is not a single instrument within an orchestra, I think, apart from maybe percussion, would pass a usability test. If you actually just threw the thing in front of someone and asked them to try and use it, no one's going to get very far with a bassoon. But there's also another complexity, and that's of people and all of the different kinds of people that want to learn our software. Because similarly, if you imagine all the different perspectives and things that people want to do, but also if you imagine if, let's say, a guitar arrived with no industry around it to teach guitar, but just a PDF manual trying to explain to you how to play guitar, I don't think we would have the music that we have today. And so a response to complexity is diversity. And unfortunately, this is somewhere where both of our industries, so we're at the intersection of music and technology, both these industries have a problem with diversity, and this is why we struggle to deal with complexity. So this is something we really have to work on so that we can look at a future where we're not, as one of the people we did user research with recently, simply a company for men with keyboards. And the other response is experimentation. And I'm going to flat out steal from our director of engineering. He gave a talk recently where he explained that there's a difference between something that's complex and something that's complicated. And the thing with something that's complex is that you can't actually reason your way through it from the beginning to end before you start working on it. You can't build a model. So the only response to dealing with something complex is experimenting and moving your way through it piece by piece. And this is how we deal with software complexity, but we're also bringing this to everything else that we do. And I guess in the end, this is because the whole process isn't rational. As a designer, I'm highly skeptical of people that tell me that they have a rational, structured process that can deal with things like brand and human emotion and the use of products in complex contexts. Because if there was a rational approach, someone would have found it quite a long time ago and everyone would apply it. And this means that people are both similar to alcohol, our problem and the solution to our problems. So the biggest asset that we have as a company is people, both the people that use our software, the people that teach our software, and the people that make it. And connecting those people is a huge thing that we do because it's actually the only tangible asset that we have apart from a couple of desks and laptops. And so that's where my talk comes to an end. I'm not going to try to draw too many conclusions, or more than I think I already did. But if you do find these things interesting, please come and find me afterwards, or come and find us on the internet. Thank you.